today marks 80 years since the concentration camp Auschwitz was liberated, bringing to light the horrors of the Holocaust, where more than 6 million Jewish people were killed during World War II. The King is visiting the camp today, becoming the first British monarch in history to do so. However, new research shows that more than a quarter of British adults say that they have never heard of Auschwitz. So we're asking today, how important is it to keep remembering, to keep having these anniversaries, Jane? We see the survivors now are becoming fewer and fewer. They were children at the time. They're a lot of them in their 90s now. And I've seen so many interviews over the weekend and read interviews, and that's just their message, like, we must not let people forget that this happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because if you forget what's happened in the past, then you, A, don't realise how far we've come, and B, you might not notice if it starts happening again or builds up to it. Because if you think about it at the time, most Germans at the time thought that they were living in a democracy. And then all it took was one person to kind of come in and be a dictator and to take over and to give that message to try and, you know, wipe out a whole sort of race of people. And I think, you know, I do get it. I do get that whenever you switch on the news these days, it's gloom and doom. And it's very appealing to sort of think, I just want to live in a bubble where I don't know about any of this stuff that's going on. But, you know, we all have to stay awake to the possibilities of something like that ever happening again. We can never take it for granted that it might not. And I think the Holocaust is very symbolic of all evil, not just, you know, against the Jewish people in that era of time. And so I think if you forget that, it's a very dangerous thing to forget.
I heard a survivor, Gloria, saying, she had people to say they were monsters, you know, they described them as monsters who did this, and she said they're not monsters, they were human beings doing this to other human beings, Gloria, that which we must never forget or let that ever happen again.
I think for all of us, though, you know, the crimes were just so hideous that when you listen to people talking about it, as you did over the weekend, and so did I cried at one woman's description because, in a way, we as individuals can't understand the horrific situation that they had to go through. So I think days like today are really, really important. And I took a quote out of one of the papers today because a lot of the columnists have written about this, and they say things like, with anti-Semitism on the rise, this reflection on the terrible and unspeakable crimes that happened, we should remember these crimes, and as you rightly said, so that they never happen again, because it's so awful.
I think particularly, you're right, I think particularly, Brenda, for children, it's important for us to... children have these lessons at school in history, and we were saying we're losing some of these people. And they're the ones, to hear someone's personal story makes it so poignant and so real.
And as Jane said, I totally agree with what Jane says, you know, we have to have these historical moments and remember these things so that we know how far we've come and where we've still got to go as well, and especially for children growing up. I personally think, you know, all discrimination and exclusion is a crime against humanity. And that's the thing. You're saying, you know, they weren't monsters, they were humans committing things against humans. And I think it's important that we need to remember, not only is it important to remember the history, but not to erase certain things and not tell children the correct information. That's just as important. And I think...
to call things out.
Well,
to call out hatred, to call out discrimination. Racism.
Exactly. If you're not prepared to make the change, then no change will happen.
But yes, and I'm just going to say as well that the education going forward for our young people today, some of our young people don't even know anything about World War II. And so Ruth brought up the point this morning, and most of us have read it in the paper, about AI. And this marvellous survivor who's about 95, you've got the story.
Yeah, it's a gentleman, there he is. I've forgotten his name now, sorry. And they have recorded him answering about 100 questions, mostly from children. He visits schools and he educates children. And they are now making an AI of him, an information film, so that his voice will always be heard forevermore, even when he's no longer there. Because children, I think, ask the most extraordinary questions because they have no filter and they just say what they feel, ask what they want to ask. And I think that's extraordinary. We all complain about AI and the robots and all they're taking over the world. But for times like that, I think it's an amazing thing. Sorry, did you just speak? Manfred Goldberg is his name. Thank you very much. I didn't hear you.